Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, but a very special show in the fact that we have Mike Lano back with us after a sad but hopefully productive absence. And of course, the effervescent Evan Ginsberg. So, Mike, you have a lot of news to tell us. First of all, I know you knew Sabu personally, so why don't you give us a couple minutes of your thoughts on the passing of Sabu?
Well, two guys, because right before the show started or earlier today, I emailed Russ that our APW brother, Mike Diamond, Maxx Justice, was just on his bicycle heading home and got hit by a car and passed. So I will forward along information, put that online when there's a service, etc. This is in Northern California. I'll just talk briefly about Mike, who I'd known since day one of his training with Ricky Thompson in that initial class of APW, along with Mike Modest and Donovan Morgan and Super Diablo and Matt Heisen, who later became Spike Dudley, and Mike Lockwood, who later became Crash Holly.
Yeah.
So many others came through the doors, but during the time, it was either United or Delta that he worked for at San Francisco Airport to support himself while he was going through wrestling school. And this was like
United. He worked for United.
Yeah, United, 95, 96. But it was just, as Russ will attest later, just a terrific guy, always smiling. He, of course, left after the King of the Indies, which begat Ring of Honor, as Gabe Sapolsky and RF have said. They saw the tape of that two-day tournament from Vallejo, California. Russ managed on it. I was ringside photographer the 2 days of it in Vallejo, California, near San Francisco. All the great international junior stars of the day, and that was...
I got to say this. Maxx Justice was like a tank built on top of a tank, of another tank.
Well, Russ, you could talk about him. You could talk about him later, but I remember big man matches with Dilip Singh, who later became Great Khali. There's another guy started at APW, and now he runs big shows in India. So we'll talk more about him next week. But Sabu, I had known since the around 87, 88 at Sheik's house in Lansing, Michigan, and was very close to the Sheik, and even closer with a guy, near my age, and his nephew, who looked up to Sheik like his real dad. If you watch Dark Side of the Ring, I'd asked them not to credit me or put me in the credits on that because I felt this season was a little exploitive. However, I was pleased for the most part with 95% of the Sheik's thing. It wasn't a negative dark side of the ring. And, they were more celebrating his positives and stuff before going into, the later stuff. But you can't argue with his success and the success of the guys that he trained. I mean, I remember in Memphis, that was their first territory really outside of a couple of Michigan indies, that Sabu, RVD, and Judge Dredd, who later dropped out of the business. But I have so many Sabu stories I'll tell over the next couple of shows. What a kind person he was. Evan will talk about. He was married to a female that he met in Japan, Mibu. I think she kind of changed her name to parallel his of Sabu. But she didn't seem like the greatest partner for him. She didn't really bother to learn a whole lot of English. And when they split up and Sabu later met Melissa Coates, as Evan will say, I think he found his true life partner. And they were really a nice team. They came into APW a couple of times, but I shot them in different places like Vegas at a CAC where she would work as Super Genie. And this was, at least the period in APW, was when he needed the new, I think it was a knee and a hip. And they did a GoFundMe and he got that, but he could barely move. And Melissa was so kind and caring as his valet, sort of recreating Sheik's wife, Joyce, who worked in the late 50s, early 60s as Princess Salima. Well, here she was as Super Genie, and anything that Sabu needed, he'd say, give me a table, throw me the chair. He could barely move. He was immobile, but she would do all of these things. They were a great unit. And then she lost her leg. Evan can go into that, which was tragic because we all love Melissa. And she was a great female wrestler. She worked all over. But then she kind of put that on hold when she was with him to be his valet. And then she lost her leg. And then when she passed, in my mind, all the times I saw him after that at CACs in Vegas with Fonzie and RVD, he was never the same. And Ev, how long ago was it that she passed? Was it not quite 3 years, like two and a half?
I lose track of time, especially with COVID, but it was a few years back, and she was only 52.
He was only 60. He was never the same. It was sort of like he tried to carry on, but it was like a dark cloud. Anybody that knew him, you could always sense it because he was always like laughing and had this little cackle that came out of him, sort of like Chic. But so many great times with him. I'll tell this one story. There's some stories I cannot tell or shouldn't tell, but I was with him, so many times, twice in Japan. But we're going to Revere, Mass for a show where Benoit was debuting for ECW. So this was like 93 or early 94. Benoit debuts against Taz for ECW on this house show at a smaller venue, Revere, Mass. And it was over, and I guess I forget, we were going to the next town. I think we were going right back to Philly, maybe the Red Roof Inn, the infamous Red Roof Inn. But Sabu's driving, and it was a couple hour drive, and entire way. So he has Public Enemy, RVD, and Sabu, and me in the front with Sabu, and them in the back. They're smoking pot till hell won't have it. The windows are all closed up. You could barely see out of them. And we're nearing Philly, and there was whatever it's called, a police stop, where they search vehicles or they're looking for some criminal. And he could see it way up ahead. So he stops the car and he pulls over. I forget if we were on some kind of road where he could pull over. And he goes, Mike, switch seats with me. You drive. And I go, why? I mean, I was already worried that, any cop stopping us the minute the window would open, you could smell and see the pot smoke. This was when it was illegal. And he goes, they took away my driver's license. I don't have a valid driver's license. And I go, oh, effing shit. So I get behind the wheel. And mind you, I had a contact high. I was never a pot smoker, but I had a contact high being in with those brothers. And they were all good-hearted people, love Public Enemy, both of them. I don't care what anybody says. They were sweet guys, nice, great friends. RVD, Sabu, of course. Somehow we managed to get through with me driving. They never asked me or said anything.
Because you look so square. Come on, Mike.
I was sure we were going to effing go to jail because that was the only route or way we could go, but we managed to pull through.
Yeah, Sabu was driving, you probably would have. If Sabu was driving, you probably would have wound up in jail. So good move there.
But there was other things and parallelisms I'll talk about in future shows. I want to run this by Evan first with Sabu. You wouldn't believe the connection with him and Billy Graham. You just would not. But he was a great friend for decades. I remember him. I can probably say this now. Bully Ray, Bubba Ray Dudley was talking on Busted Open, about him after ECW shows. But after Living Dangerously, the first ECW pay-per-view that Bill Ott and I shot, and some others, obviously Linda Rufa was she had unrequited love for Sabu. He never picked up on it, but she made him, like, all of those outfits she sewed. She was a big-time photographer for, X amount of years in the 90s, particularly WCW. Beautiful girl. But Sabu never returned any of that. I mean, he was appreciative that she made him all of the long john tights that he wore that were, of like Arab looking, that period. And fantastic seamstress. What was I going to say about that? Well, a couple of things. Backstage after the Living Dangerously pay-per-view, he was running around in his famous cowboy boots that he would only wear after the pay-per-view and really nothing else. And he's just running around acting like a madman backstage naked just with cowboy boots. And I'm looking at Taz and some other folks. I go, what the fuck? What's he doing? And he would do that a couple other times. Um, so I guess that was just his way. He blew off steam, but he was funny. I remember introducing him to Nicole Bass, I guess when she debuted. Now, I didn't go to every ECW, but I was at a good number of them. And anyway, it was great seeing him at Cauliflower Alley. He chuckled when I had to sneak in Van Damme and his wife because to a CAC event where we had somebody who quit CAC, but they were giving Rob a hard time about his tickets, which he had paid for, but they weren't showing it. And I don't know. So Sabu was like laughing and giving him shit about that. But here's a guy, lifelong, he was always looking out for his friends. That was my point earlier. Is any indie that he was on, this was before he got to ECW, but just after his Japanese success where he had a name. If promoters like a TC Martin, for example, promoted in Las Vegas and Sacramento, wanted to use him, he said, you got to use my guys. You got to use RVD and Judge Dredd. And nobody had heard of Rob Van Dam really. This was even before he did some shots for WCW. So Rob was paired up with Bobby Bradley Jr., who was a bigger name, and they were this high-flying act. And I marveled at that because you saw that with like Hulk Hogan always trying to find jobs for his friends. Well, that was the same with Sabu. And, beyond his kind of, at times, for those who didn't know him, gruff exterior or whatever, he was a kick in the ass to ride around with. He had a lot of varied musical tastes. Love and miss Sabu. He was one of the few to get an obit Tuesday in the New York Times. I get the New York Times, so I was happy to see that. I wish it was longer, but I wish his life was longer. I wish Mike Diamond, Maxx Justice's life was longer, because Maxx Justice, a guy, too, that was on an XPW show with Sabu. Maxx had gone down there with Mike Modest and Donovan Morgan, and he was on some BTW shows and some other stuff. I think he was on even some TC Martin shows, but not when Sabu was on there. And so I just wanted to say a couple of words. God rest their souls. Love them both. I know Evan might have some, even though more directed towards Melissa, but he can talk about that, because I don't know her relationship history before Sabu, but I know that he was the great love of her life, just as she was for him. So we're missing some great people. Those three folks, Sabu, Melissa Coates, and of course, Maxx Justice, Mike Diamond. And, anyway, love them. I was shocked to hear that so soon after Sabu. Still, Sabu's death hasn't hit me fully. So when I hear anything, I still have asked folks there in Lansing, Michigan, to give us details if a service has not already occurred. I'm sure nobody expected this, but these were two really nice people, away from the ring. Three, if you include Melissa, which you have to. Who I had the honor of seeing her wrestle quite a few times in California when she was way before she met Sabu. She came in. She was the debut. I think she was the debut opponent for Pam, who's now known as what's she known in WWE as Bailey.
Yeah.
Pam, who went by the name, her work name when she started for BTW in California. Yeah. Which she took the first names of her two grandmas, and that was her wrestling name. You've heard of doing a porn name, and the first.
Yeah, I took the name of my bird. That's where Buddy Sotelo comes from. It was from Buddy the Bird. So yes. You got to pick it from somewhere. You got to.
I'm just protecting my throat right now, which is about to give out. So, guys, thanks for indulging me, allowing me to talk a couple of minutes, and have a great show. But those three folks, Sabu and his wife, or love of his life, Melissa Coates. I'm not sure if they were even ever got married. Evan can talk about that. And then our friend from APW, Mike Diamond, Maxx Justice. Three great people, and way too young, which seems to happen so often in the biz. But love them all, and love you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Good to see you, Mike.
Hey, everybody.
and that would be Mike. So, uh, anyway, that's the thing about Maxx is just breaks me into little pieces. I just found out about it. Mike informed me about it just before the show, and I had no idea that he was dead, and I just can't believe it. I'm stunned hearing the news, and that it was a hit and run accident. Just like what happened to poor Johnny Valiant.
Well, Johnny Valiant wasn't hit and run. It was just bad weather, and the driver's view was highly obstructed. There was nothing criminal. It was just a tragic accident.
Right. Well, this was obviously whoever ran off was a horrible person, but also just Maxx was built like, as I said, a tank on top of a tank. He was one of the largest, most physical individuals I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, and I've seen the great Khali. He was like not as tall as Khali, but just about as massive a person. And he's in the Beyond the Mat documentary. Maxx is in, and I have just a little side story about Maxx. I never got to manage against him, but he was in all the shows that I worked so at APW. And he moved over to Pro Wrestling Iron. And at Pro Wrestling Iron, he wanted, one of the things they wanted me to do was to learn how to become a ref, just in case we ever did, that shtick where, I'd be a special referee or something like that, so I had to learn how. And I thought it would be kind of fun to learn how to do that just in case. And so I was working, it was Maxx working with one of the other new recruits. And I don't remember the student. I don't think the student ever made pro or anything like that, but he was working him on the mat. And I, had to go over and do the 1-2 count, because the guy's shoulders were on. And Maxx, who was, I mean, his legs were like as big as like a tree trunk. They were like as large as like a barbell. And so he had him in a headlock. He had him like in a side headlock, right? And was trying to use his leverage to pin him. And he swung over to like reposition himself, and his leg just walloped me right on the side of the head and literally just knocked me sideways. And I was like, woohoo! He like nearly knocked me out. And it proves something that, well, first of all, the guy was massive. And second of all, that even something like being a ref, if you're in the wrong position and something happens in the ring that you're not expecting, you can take a pretty significant bump even though you're not expecting it. And so
Mike Lano broke his ribs shooting ringside as a photographer. One of the wrestlers fell on him. So
yes,
dangerous out there. Greg Valentine was walking up the ring steps on an indie, and they were old and in bad condition, and the ring steps collapsed, and he tore his knee up before he even got in the ring. So, you take your life in your hands getting in a wrestling ring. People don't realize.
Yeah, no, that's a damn good point, is that people don't know that a lot of indie rings are ancient, stored in really crappy conditions, so they get the wood gets warped, and the padding, everyone thinks that, oh, well, it's like falling on a gigantic pillow when you hit the ring. That padding is at least like, maybe at best, you'd say like an inch. But the thing is, it's been around usually that padding's been around for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And so it gets smushed in transport and by guys using it and walking around on it and getting body slammed on it. And the wood gets, splintered, and there's like weak spots in different parts, or the wood gets warped because of how it gets, like especially in other parts of the country, it gets like the weather, the humidity warps it, and so it's not even any longer, and so parts of it are uneven, and as you run across the ring, you have to know the dead spots that are in the ring, or else you could really hitting a dead spot is kind of what killed the career of Diesel.
Kevin Nash.
Yeah, Kevin Nash. He hurt his knee while running across the ring, and what he said was that there was a dead spot in it, and he just planted his leg, and it didn't spring up for him. It just kind of like went downwards as he went down, and then it went back up. It bounced back upwards while his leg was fully extended, and that like knocked his knee backwards and caused him to have, the hyperextension. So yeah, no, the ring is a very dangerous place, especially in indies that don't keep like really good maintenance of their ring. But God, I can't. I mean, I didn't talk to Maxx probably in the last 20 years. I can't say he was like a good friend of mine like Mark Smith that I talked to like all the time when he was, in over in Puerto Rico and Japan. I talked to him in emails and so forth. But I am so sad to hear about his death. I would have the guy seemed like he was invincible. And he was in good health. It's not like one of these guys that did a lot of drugs or partied a lot. Maxx didn't party at all. He was like really a very, straight shooting guy. It reminds me a lot of what happened with Tony Jones, except Tony Jones was a heart thing, and this was obviously even more avoidable, with somebody.
Wrong place at the wrong time.
Yes, wrong place at the wrong time. It does make me kind of glad that I swore off bike riding a few years ago when I hurt my hip. I know it's a good way to stay in shape, but unfortunately, around here in the Bay Area, he's not alone in the number of people that get killed on bicycles. And, but sadly, at least most of those other situations, the person who hits the person is responsible. And at least tries to offer aid and doesn't just drive off into the night or whatever. So I hope they find that person, and I'll obviously, make some an announcement here. And then, I do want to talk to you about, unless you don't feel like talking about Melissa Coates and what her involvement was, what you knew about her relationship with Sabu. But I know we did a tribute show to her, and it was one of the most popular tribute shows that we've done for anybody.
Well, Melissa was at my wedding. We were very close. She, when I was teaching, she would visit my students. She slept at my house. We were platonic friends, but we were very close. And she knew my wife, and she lived with Sabu for many, many years. And it was kind of like Bonnie and Clyde, they'd get in the car and drive to the next gig and, wrestle and, do autograph appearances. And they weren't cut out for 9 to 5, they were a different breed. She would ask my advice, and I would say, Melissa, you're a champion bodybuilder. You could be teaching gym or something in the public school system, or you could be a highly paid personal trainer, market yourself towards, wealthy clientele. I had a friend that did that in the Hamptons, one of the richest areas in the world. And, but, what she knew was getting in a car and driving God knows how far to the next indie booking or the next convention. Or it was a tough way to live. And at one point, his body gave out, and he needed a hip replacement. So they do a GoFundMe for him, and I was promoting it. I mean, I didn't put it together. I was just hyping it as much as I could. And these two scumbags, was saying, oh, he's just going to use that money for drugs or whatnot. And I'm like, no, this is a legitimate GoFundMe. The guy needs a hip replacement. So next thing I know, they're publicly saying they're going to ream Evan Ginsberg on their podcast heard by 40 people or whatever. I'm like, go fuck yourself. It's like I just ignored it. And these aren't the two guys you're thinking of, Russ. These are two other guys.
Yeah.
There's no
There's
shortage.
no shortage of them, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's no shortage of self-important podcasters and Facebook admins, So, my heart was in the right place. This was my friend and her partner, and I was trying to promote his totally legitimate hip replacement. And, eventually he did get it. And I'll make the same point I've made many times for the asshole corporate apologists to hear it once more. A guy like Sabu, who was a revolutionary figure in pro wrestling, who took it to a different place with the moves and, his whole persona, the promoters were never there for him. They were never there for him. The fans appreciated what he did. The fans backed that hip replacement GoFundMe. And the fans and guys like Chris Jericho are supporting his current GoFundMe, sadly, to be buried. This guy should have been a millionaire for changing wrestling and taking
I always called him the Evil Knievel of wrestling. I think what Evil Knievel was to stunt bikes, Sabu was for pro wrestling. I mean, that man. And tell me that maybe other than Terry Funk, another person whose body took more punishment while being a wrestler.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. No, it's just let me go beyond that. I mean, I'm going to wrestling since 1974. That's over 50 years, attending live wrestling literally around the world. And I would easily say that Terry Funk versus Sabu, the two times I saw it live, were among the 10 or 20 greatest matches I've ever seen, ever. So it wasn't just...
And most physical. And I mean, you can even say best is one thing, but you can't get more physical than Terry Funk versus Sabu. Those two just literally threw their bodies away so that they could entertain the fans. Literally.
But some people perceive, he was just doing crazy high spots. And I'm telling you, those two matches were great on every level. Every level. I mean, it was, I've seen thousands and thousands of live matches, and I'm telling you, those two matches, top 20.
Was there a person that existed to whom wrestling meant more to than Sabu? I mean, wrestling was everything to him.
Well, I'll take this to a different place. He sacrificed his body for his art. He suffered mightily for his art. James Brown, the singer, his knees would bleed after a performance. Prince needed those painkillers because Prince would do splits during his performance. And that's ultimately what killed Prince. The painkillers that he was taking. He died young too. So relatively young. He was like 56, 57, whatever, Prince. So the point being, these performers were all-time greats, and they were willing to suffer to entertain their fans. Now, I get the other side of it where somebody will say, Nakamura is safe, same 5 moves, WWF style, extended his career, and he's making good money, and the guy goes surfing. Okay, I understand that. But at the same time, he could have been an all-time great, and instead is just another warm body on a vanilla WWE card, churning out instantly forgettable pablum. So he made that choice. In the old days, I would call that a sellout. But today, it's like, he's doing the right thing because he's making big money. And okay, and it's sad that Sabu didn't make big money, but 100 years from now, they'll be watching Sabu matches. They won't be watching 90% of the WWE roster. That I could tell you.
Yeah, I mean, but really, Sabu in the end was just like a living batch of scar tissue. I mean, it was just basically bones and scar. And that's pretty much all that was left of him. And it's not surprising. I mean, not that it was surprising that he could even make age 60, you know.
Yeah,
His
it's like
body was,
dog years. It's like
yeah,
dog
exactly.
years.
His body was probably like 300 years old, you know,
Terry Funk also.
yes.
You know, as a fan, but beyond that, as an agent, I went on the road with many of the legends, and it always broke my heart to see Lou Albano in a wheelchair, Iron Sheik in a wheelchair, Abdullah the Butcher, Harley Race. You know, people, wrestlers hate the word fake because they'll always go, my hip replacement wasn't fake, my knee replacement wasn't fake. You know, my 3 marriages that went south because I was on the road 300 plus days a year. And then the obsessives, the corporate apologists would do they all pissed away fortunes on wine, women, and songs. Sabu never made a fortune. A lot of these guys never made a fortune. Johnny Valiant, who was my dear friend, never made a fortune. And for the geniuses,
Superstar Billy Graham.
Well, Billy Graham made good money.
He made good money, but he had to spend it all on his medical care, pretty much. You know, in the end.
Yeah.
You know, it's you don't get out of there, you know, unscathed. You put your body on the line, and Superstar definitely did, to, you know, make himself a champion and to do all the crazy matches that he did. And in the end, yeah, maybe he made a lot of money in wrestling, but he spent it all on and not on, you know, wine, women, and song, but to, you know, just for the basics, to stay alive and to not.
He had
succumb.
crazy medical bills. You know, check out his interviews with Hannibal. You know, you'll see all of it. But yeah, Billy Graham did not end well, and
about half the guys in 350 days didn't end up too well. You know, sadly.
There's exceptions. I mean,
right.
Nikolai saved his money, and Bret Hart, of course, and Lanny Poffo, and they're all in 350 days. But some guys do not end up well. And the myth is that they all made fortunes because you see them on TV, and Johnny Valiant and many others never broke $100,000, and they were on the road 300 plus days, and they, you know, had insane expenses. And even when the bigger money came in, mid 80s in the Hulkamania rock and wrestling era, and let's say these guys were doing $400,000 a year, that they're on the road 300 plus days a year. They said their road expenses were 100,000 plus. So fans have no idea that.
Yeah, no, and most of them don't know how little medical helps when, especially, you know, you get a prescription that says you get, you know, 30 pills in a month. Okay, what winds up happening is these guys need 30 pills in like a week, or maybe
some of them are doing it in a day.
Some of them are doing it in a day. You know, because that's the only way they can cope with the levels of pain they have. And having had to take Oxy for my broken hip and for my broken shoulder that was replaced, I can understand what those substances do to your mind and do to your body overall. And it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I'm a big opponent of Oxy and the opioids that they're throwing at people right now. And I, for my broken shoulder that I had just a little over a year now, and got replaced, I did not take the painkillers. I took the painkillers for 2 days, and they started making me feel bad again, and I stopped doing them, and I never went back. And when I had my surgery done, I took 2 Oxy painkillers immediately when I first got out of surgery, and after that I stayed with like ibuprofen and other stuff that was non opioid, you know, for my pain reliever, and I made it. I survived.
Yeah,
So
but
I
you're
think
not taking bumps every night. So let me address this.
Yeah.
For the Vince McMahon apologist. some of these podcasters and fanboys, you know, these wrestlers were in mortal fear of losing their spot, so they would wrestle hurt, and many of them got painkiller addictions because of it. They, you know, it's like they're getting pushed, and all of a sudden they have a serious injury, and it's like suck it up and get in the ring, and next thing you know, you have a painkiller addiction, and it's not like, oh, you know, go take a few weeks or months off. It wasn't like that. They were literally in fear of losing their job and livelihood, not being able to support their family, and you know.
Well, what people don't understand also, you're getting to it, is that there's a cycle. What happens is you take the painkillers, right? Because you need to wrestle while you're hurt, and so you don't take the time off to fix that injury. So that injury then becomes chronic, okay? Because it never goes away because you wrestled on top of it and made something that was maybe torn, you pulverize into something that becomes hurt
Chronic.
for the rest.
Chronic.
Chronic, and becomes hurt for the rest of your life, which means that you then are stuck on taking the painkillers for the rest of your life, because anytime you move using that part of your body that was chronically hurt and never got to heal, you are in even more pain. And when you get older, for those of you who are younger folks that are listening to this podcast, that pain becomes worse. No matter what pain you have in your life when you're younger, it's worse when you're older. Am I correct about that?
Oh yeah. Speaking of ECW, you know, one of Sabu's ECW guys was Balls Mahoney, and he did a shoot interview. He said, I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is crawl to get my painkillers. And the second I heard that, I go, this guy's not going to make it, and he didn't. And I have a piece on Balls Mahoney in my book. I have a piece on Melissa Coates in my book. You know, again, these guys really need a union. The promoters do not look out for them for the most part, and they really, you know, if you're hurt, you need time off. Simple as that. As much as you're pushed as a superhero or supervillain, cartoon character, whatever the case may be, this is flesh and blood human beings, and you know, the human body gives out at some point, especially if you're bombarding it with all kinds of drugs to keep going. And you know, things are better today for the big stars anyway. They have a lighter schedule and they're making better money, but you know, your body's just not cut out to do what wrestling demands.
You say it's a lighter schedule, but you know, WWE has events going pretty much 3 to 5 days a week, you know, just on TV, you know, and it's mainly because they have such a large roster that they aren't chewing everybody up, but there's still a pretty relentless schedule for the WWE, you know.
They say they're cutting down or even cutting out their house shows, so it is better, but you're just not meant. The human body's just not meant to take that kind of punishment, especially with the crazy high spots today.
Right, and the extreme spots, and you know,
well, Ospreay's not going to wrestle to 60 like some of the old school guys.
No, in fact, that's the guy that I compared that wrestles now that is the closest to you know, a Sabu or a Terry Funk would be Ospreay right now. You know, and it makes me wonder how he can, you know, make it through, especially like that one match where he started bleeding in the first match and they had him in, you know, two other match later on in the card. You know, he gave out like a gallon in the first match that he had, and it's like, what is he gonna get a transfusion in between, you know, matches? Are they gonna take him to the hospital and bring him back? You know.
Then you have geniuses every day of the week. They're on social media going, Ospreay is just a spot monkey. You know, the guy's the best in the world. The guy's unbelievable.
At least I would put him in the top 5 of wrestlers that are out there right now. Definitely.
I would put him number 1. The guy's amazing. But
Yeah, I mean, for what he does and what he puts his body through to get a match done, I don't know if there's anyone that is like that. But let me transition on to something else just real quickly, and that is yesterday saw my triumphant return to a wrestling match here in Marin County, the first wrestling match that Marin County has had in over 30, close to 40 years. We Wrestling for Charity, my federation that I work with, and I do with my friend Butch, Robert Butch Haw. We put together a show that occurred over at the Desire to Inspire Studios over in San Rafael, and we just did it yesterday. We didn't have a huge crowd because well, first of all, ring took up like the entire warehouse, literally, like right up until like a foot of where the actual door was. So we had to have an outside crowd. And it wasn't, we didn't have a million people there, but it was a loud crowd. It was a very active crowd, a very respectful crowd that enjoyed what they saw. And we had a great show. It was really a lot of fun. And the kids the wrestlers now, they do seem like kids. They're like the age of like my friends' kids, okay? Or some of my friends' kids are older than the ones that are in wrestling. So it's like, wow. I mean, they seem so young, but they're all so enthusiastic about doing it. And we raised money for the Desire to Inspire Studios, and everyone had a really great time. We had 6 matches. I managed in the final match, which was fun, and we had the Titan up against Elliot Ray versus Elliot Allen against Romeo, Hot Stuff Romeo, and he won the Wrestling for Charity championship over my guy. So, and I did a little bit cheating, and it was great. I didn't get otherwise any kind of bumps because I'm too old for that. But it was really great. I mean, people that went to it, a couple of people said that was the first match they've ever seen because there aren't any indie shows here, and going to a WWE show is rare. We don't get that many. And when it does come out here, because it's so rare, the tickets are crazy expensive now. They're like 200 seats or $200 each, and so a family of 4, I mean, you're looking at like $1,000 to go. So I know it's not fair. We've talked about it many times on the show, but that's what we're trying to do, is trying to, bring wrestling down to a lower level and give these kids, God, I can't keep saying that about them, but giving these young individuals that are in wrestling a chance to apply their craft and to show what they've got, and to be in front of a live audience and entertain, people that are paying to see them. And it was a great thing all around. So I can say that for something positive and uplifting, and working with the next generation of up and coming wrestlers is the thing that I've always loved to do. That to me is the best part of what I've done in wrestling, is watch people transition from nowhere to being on TV and being big stars. And I've got a pretty good track record when you consider, how many wrestling feds there are in the world and how many indie feds there are in the world. The fact that I've seen maybe like a dozen different people. We talked earlier about Bailey, and I watched her before she ever became a big deal. And Cena only I worked with a couple times, so he wasn't very close to me, but Timothy Thatcher was, I remember when he was just a skinny little kid, and obviously Mark Smith and Modest and Morgan and Tony Jones and so forth, and even, folks like Virgil, who'd never made it big time, Virgil Flynn, but in the business has all the respect of people who really know Bay Area wrestling. And we talked about him yesterday, before the matches, just in the back, and just even the next generation's worth of wrestlers know who Virgil Flynn was, and he's spoken with such regret, with such respect. That's something I wanted to bring up, and that is something that people don't understand. And I had a friend of mine come for the first time. He'd never been in a wrestling audience. I gave him some ring time. He actually cut a promo, which is fine. And he did really well for a first timer. Just working with me on, like, we did an angle where he was the landlord of the place where we were performing, and the idea was, if I won, I was going to shut the place down and turn it into a Bitcoin mine. And
it's like the Little Rascals. They're always trying to, like, take the place over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's an easy way to be a villain. And so, he had this fake contract that he called the Honest Abe deal, and it was, it was so over the top, corny kind of thing, like something from early, like, Tuesday Night Titans or something like that it really worked. It was really fun. And then he hung out in the back with the wrestlers. He had never seen a live wrestling show in his life, and he took a lot of photos and got to meet a lot of people. And he called me this morning after the show, and he said, "God, that was really an amazing experience to meet these people and to get to know them, and how respectful they were." And that's the point I was getting to, is that people don't understand what respect means in a locker room. It's everything. Respect, showing that when you walk in to a match and you're in the back, you shake everybody's hand or you greet them. You say hello. You say who you are. You say what feds you've worked with in the past, or seeing if you know the people that they've worked with in the area. And everybody, from the people that hand out flyers, okay, to the boys that are taking apart the ring and putting the stuff back in the truck, to the people that put out chairs, they all have respect for each other, and that we're all working together to make this show happen, and make it happen at the best level that you can. And so you don't have people just sitting there on their phones the entire time. People are like, "Hey, what can I do? Can I set up chairs? Can I, put some flyers up around the area so that people know where to find us? Can I, clean up something, or can I help put out the merchandise? And can I put tickets, away, or help set up the ticket booth, whatever." Everybody is lending a hand and working together to make it happen, especially in a situation where we're raising money for charity. And I thought that was something that really, when people think about how greedy and self-involved the next generation is, they have to look at, like, an indie wrestling fed and say to themselves, you know what? That's probably the best example of modern day, like, kids getting together for a cause to make something happen that's good, that I can think of immediately in my mind. What are your thoughts there, Evan?
Oh, there are plenty of good young people out there in the world. This generation versus that generation. That's there's good kids out there. There's bad kids out there. It's always been the same. And what turns me off, though, is kind of the shift in society where corporations and corporate leaders, and it's kind of like when I was a kid, when I was a young man, you didn't want to be the man, you wanted to fight the man. Now they want to be the man. They'll give every excuse in the book for a Vince McMahon or a Trump or whoever. It's like, all that matters is the bottom line, or they all do it, or that there's some kind of spin for behavior and greed and ruthlessness that isn't, something that I would want my kids or nephews or nieces to, admire and strive for. Um, you know, it, I mean, I've butted heads with a lot of people in the wrestling business because I've been critical of Vince and WWE and such, and it's like truth hurts. I mean, these guys have done some ruthless things, and people have been hurt and not ended well, as we were talking about earlier. And if you address it, you could spin all the excuses in the world, but for champions and headliners, to die needing GoFundMe's, it's disgraceful. It's utterly disgraceful. And thank heavens for the Chris Jerichos, who, by the way, Chris Jericho's politics lean right, and I respect him as a person, even though my politics lean left, because Chris Jericho has a heart. And every GoFundMe that's out there, you see guys like him and Foley, helping. And Foley's very left and Jericho's more right. And what's the difference? They're good people. But I just don't excuse ruthless corporations and politicians and, et cetera, so on. And
speaking of ruthless corporations, I do have an announcement to make to the listening public, which is that my Facebook account was deactivated. So so people will not be able to find me any longer on Facebook. But I am on Blue Sky. So if you folks look for me on at rjackman bsky.social, that is where I am at Blue Sky now. Again, that's at rjackman.bsky.social. And I will be starting to include that on my announcement. Thank God all my stuff is on YouTube, so I don't have to deal with Facebook's politics any longer.
What about wrestling and everything coast to coast?
We'll talk about that offline. Hopefully you'll be able to get on it from your end, because I made you part owner of it.
So that's still there. They could watch the episodes there also.
Yes, but hopefully folks you'll still be able to find it on YouTube. We're still going to be on ECUSA TV, and I'll need you to probably tell a bunch of people that I'm not on Facebook any longer, so that they all know.
You can appeal it. It just takes forever.
No, I appealed and they turned me down. Yeah, bunch of assholes. I'd like to say right now officially, fuck you, Zuckerberg. Okay, I don't normally swear on the show, but fuck you, Zuckerberg. You're a fucking asshole, and I hate Facebook. And I've had enough with their Byzantine and corporate rule. It shows you what it's like to live in a corpocracy, where you have a corporation that runs everything. You don't have any rights. If a company like that, like Facebook, decides they don't want to keep your account, even if they make a mistake, which I think is what happened, even if there's nobody that you can talk to and nobody you can appeal to, when they decide that they're just not going to help you, they just put their, you get caught by some algorithm somewhere. I've been threatened. Facebook's been threatening to ban me for years now for one thing or another. Posts that I've made. I once made a post. Okay, obviously, you're not surprised. I get in political arguments all the time, and I'm in Facebook discussion groups that discuss politics. And I was bringing up the fact, someone was saying, well, Catholics are always on the side of good, and I said, look, here's a picture of Hitler shaking the Pope's hand in 1938. Okay, so you can see that the Catholics weren't exactly innocent when it came to Hitler and the Nazis. There were Catholics that sided with the Nazis, And Facebook saw that post and said I was promoting Nazism.
Oh, man.
Because I posted that and I appealed it. And they said this, and you're going to love this. They said, you're right. You are making a political argument, but we're still taking the post down and we're still suspending your account for 48 hours. So they acknowledged I was right, but they still put a strike against my record and punished me for a weekend because I posted something that was historically, factually accurate to support the argument that I was making. And I got to tell you, their algorithm is crazy, and anyone can be a victim, like I was just a victim. And they're getting stricter and stricter. I don't think it's a surprise that since Trump got reelected, that things are swinging into a more right-leaning type of structure on some of these social media groups because they know they can get away with it. And I've seen people post all sorts of hateful Nazi, KKK, white supremacist stuff and not get punished. But when I post something that's anti-Trump, or something that I'm using to refute those right wingers, I get punished. And got tired of that, but it didn't matter because Facebook decided they were tired of me. So
you'll have more time during the day. Facebook could be a time suck.
I'm beginning to realize that maybe I can become a more productive citizen if I spend less time online and more time, living my life. So that's what may happen.
Your kids will be in college before you blink. Enjoy them instead of Facebook.
I think you might be right about that. Well, on that note, I'm gonna leave for today, and we'll see you again next week when we do our show. So thanks for being part of it, and we'll see everyone next week. Good night, everyone. Okay.